Howdy, howdy, guys. Good morning. We are officially in Rocktober. We had a bit of a rock and roll song at the beginning. Some people are like, oh my gosh, man, it's like I'm awake. Yes, we are all go 1000% here. It's 10 a.m. where I'm at, and it's Saturday morning science time. How you doing, Bull?
I'm pretty good, actually. Thank you.
All right. So we got Bull hanging out doing the production and stuff. So he's awesome. If you have your own show, you can check out Bull and check out his stuff and he can run it for you. It makes my life a lot easier because I already have 9,000 things going on and Bull handles like the stuff for the show. I just send it to him. He plugs it in and does his little his magic. It's magic, I tell you. It's sorcery and witchcraft. Bull is a sorcerer. Mhm. So go for it, Bull. What were you going to say?
I don't know what to say. Like, I'm a wizard. Okay.
See, I'm usually like flying by the seat of my pants. And this is where I can say a wizard is never late. A wizard arrives exactly when he means to, right? We arrive.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so hello to everyone in the side chat. We're streaming on Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and also on D Live. So 5 different places now we're streaming to, trying to get out the good news of science. So guess what we're going to talk about today, guys? You know what we're going to talk about today? It was in our hold screen. The fear. Oh, I'm just not going to move because something's going to get me. I just know it. It's like right there. I can feel it breathing on my neck. Oh my God. Should I turn around? I'm afraid to turn around. Is there anything behind me? There's like a Cyberman behind me, isn't there? He's going to get me. We're going to talk about fear. Oh my gosh. Fear is an amazing thing. I'm still waiting for something to get me, Bull. Somebody just say boo and get it over with, because this is terrible. Oh my goodness. Okay. That's one of those things. So we're going to talk about fear today. So what are we going to break down? What are we going to break down? We are going to talk about all kinds of different things. We're going to talk about what is it? What is the fear? Have you got the fear? We're going to talk about how it works. How does it work? What if it goes wrong? What if your fear mechanisms and everything is just like out of whack? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. And how can we overcome this sort of thing? All right, because I get the fear. It's in the form of anxiety. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. All right, so let's do the breakdown. Let's do the breakdown, then we'll say hi to everybody in the chat. Boo, I know, it's scary. So essentially, fear. There's, psychiatrists and psychologists say that there's 2 brains in charge. You have your rational side that rules, and you have your emotional side that can rule. Also, your body can respond accordingly to which particular brain is in charge. And you have different brain structures that are part of the fear mechanism. So, we're going to talk about those different brain structures. We're going to talk about how it is that one side gets control and the other. We're also going to talk about the fun fear versus the icky fear versus the awful fear and all that kind of stuff, and what happens when it goes wonky. All right, so let's dive in a bit. So essentially, what we're talking about, fear is the response to our brains being presented with certain stimuli. Fear can be fun, frightening, useful, and horrible. Fear is a delicate dance between the rational brain and the emotional brain. The rational brain tends to reassure the emotional brain that it is safe. If the rationality loses control, the emotional brain can take over, and the sense of fear overwhelmingly can begin, that fight or flight instinct that kicks in. But even after that particular sensation kicks in, usually, if you do it with enough practice, the rational brain can kick in. But practice is the key, isn't it? So let's say hi to people in the chat today. All right. So we got Clifford and Doc and Talis Mantra, alias fake name. Hey, Doc Fearsome. This was Doc Fearsome. He's a patron, and he was like, I want you to talk about fear. And I'm like, coming right up. So we're talking about fear today. M Daddy 1906 in Periscope. What's up, man? If you're watching on Facebook, I can see your messages here. Joel Schultz says, science tests scare me. They scare me too. Just tests in general, if I'm honest. I don't take tests so well. And so here's a pro tip on taking a test, okay? What I would do in order to help me overcome that particular fear is all of the things, all of my mnemonic devices, not demonic devices. That's something else entirely. Mnemonic is based on mnemosyne, which happens to be one of the Greek goddesses of memory. It helps you remember, you know. So all of the different tools that you use to help you remember content, I find somewhere on the test, usually on a scratch sheet of paper, and just write them all out. And then I've made my own little reference sheet. So if I make my own little reference sheet, usually I can go back to it and I don't have to panic on, if I was taking a chemistry test, which direction are the trends for the periodic trends, blah, blah, it's this way and this way and this way over here and this way over here. I just write them out. Arrows, if I need to, just very limited cues to help me remember. So that's usually what I would do. And that didn't get rid of the fear, but it made it less ouch, when you're taking a test. Made it bearable. Oh goodness. Fear me, mortals. Who you call immortal? You have no proof. I am part Time Lord. Also, really quickly, if you follow Beelzebub, I recently did a collaboration with him, and it's going live on his channel on Monday. And I get my sonic screwdriver and everything. So that's a really fun collab. We talk about one of his favorite time travel paradoxes. So do check that out. Beelzebub. I'll shoot out a shout out on my Twitter so you can check it out. Frighteningly excited acting rationality. Fear. Yes. So here's essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about fear. Let's talk about the brain structure. So let's kind of dig into that. The brain structures. You have several different brain structures that are part of what we call the fear circuitry. You have the thalamus, the amygdala, hypothalamus, hippocampus, and frontal lobe. All right. So, what do these structures in the brain look like? So, let's see. Here is a really cool graphic of the different portions of your brain. This is from cnsforum.com. You have your frontal cortex, and you have your thalamus, which is part of your midbrain. That's on the inside. You have your amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus. Your cerebellum's back here. You have other structures as well. Now, what we're talking about here, the amygdala is the orchestrator of the fear process. So let's say you are in the woods and you are camping and you hear a twig snap. Your amygdala is going to go, oh my God, what was that? All right. Or if you hear the scary music, my amygdala, when I was hearing the scary music, is like, oh my gosh, because I've kind of been conditioned to think something awful is about to happen. Thank you, media. This is what movie makers rely on, that fear response to kick in with certain types of conditioning. The amygdala and the hippocampus are responsible for just that. So the hippocampus, much like the amygdala, is part of this conditioned fear. Hollywood relies heavily on the fact that you have been perfectly conditioned to be afraid at certain moments. Even the jump scares in particular are really important because usually it's been building up. You know it's coming. You know it's coming. You don't know when it's coming. Oh my goodness. So this is kind of where the frontal cortex begins to play this role. It's part of that sense of dread. So you have this sense of dread that's coming in. And oftentimes, dopamine is released in response to that. Now, when we're talking about the thalamus relays sensory information. So the amygdala starts firing off everything like, we need to pay attention. Freddy is going to get us. That's if you're into Nightmare on Elm Street. It might be Jason, though. If we're in the woods, it could be Jason. True story here. I used to go and volunteer sometimes with the Girl Scouts of America. I offered to be a sponsor or like a, and also like a chaperone with a troop to go out in camping. I'm not that person, I've learned. That is not a thing for me. So we're in cabins, and I have been conditioned to be completely afraid of literally everything in nature. Only at night, though. During the day, it's totally fine, but at night, yeah, no, not really cool. So I'm pretty certain I heard Jason about 37 times walking through the woods. I thought I saw a face out of my window because our brains are fantastic at, clustering illusion, getting our face, making faces out of things that aren't really faces, but, leaves crunching outside. And it sounds like a person, but it's not. It's probably just a bear, which is like way better to deal with at, 2 in the morning than Jason, which is my brain. So the emotional side's like Jason, 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 Jason. And then my rational brain's like, but Jason isn't here and it's totally fine. But I'm like, but there's no lock on the door of the cabin. What if it's another creepy dude? That happens. So it's like your rational brain is still trying to make you okay, but it's like, but there's not a lock on the door. So I've found I don't really do so well with the camping in the outside. Even if it's a cabin, unless there's a lock on the door, I really can't do it because it's not a pleasant experience for me. And the people who go to the scary clown hotels, oh my goodness, what is wrong with you? I don't get that, Bull. The creepy clown hotel, have you seen that? Does anybody sleep there?
I wouldn't. That's for sure.
There is, okay, look that up. There is a legit hotel. It's a motel type of setup. So it feels just like, Psycho, except with scary clowns that will come into your room while you're sleeping at night. That's a thing. Not my thing. I'm terrified of clowns. All right. So let's look at this next picture. Oh my God. I should talk about clowns one Saturday. Their history is pretty awful, actually. They were meant to generate fear in the hearts of children initially. Perhaps we should talk about clowns at some point. All right. So let's have a look at this particular structure. So we have stronger responses like with the amygdala. So your limbic system is back here. Your emotional fight or flight type of instinctual innate response is exceedingly strong. Your frontal cortex, the part that's your rational mind, is not as strong as you'd think. It takes lots of freaking practice in order to overcome that particular response to I'm going to punch the crap out of somebody, or I am running like this building is on fire. I mean, so that response is extremely strong compared to our rational brain response. So it's kind of crazy. Now, let's take a look at this particular picture. This is the next picture. This is your brain on fear. Okay. You're like, you guys remember if you're like of a certain age. So let's take a look at the next picture. This is your brain on fear. The particular picture here, this comes from a journal article called Fear Fosters Flight. I love the alliteration in that. Fear fosters flight. On Oral Audacity on Sundays, if you notice, we try to keep our titles to have alliteration. Quite enjoy that. I don't know why. It's just a thing. Fear fosters flight, a mechanism for fear contagion when perceiving emotion expressed by a whole body. So, essentially, how fear kind of presents itself in the brain and how it's expressed through the body through actual motions. Like, this is fear, this is kind of neutral, and this is happy. So your body will respond with gestures when a certain stimuli is presented. All right, so this particular image, this is a schematic representation of areas that are activated in processing what we would call the bodily expression of fear. So, areas of your brain for that activation, that's selective for viewing fearful expressive bodies that are represented in presumptive functional grouping. So that sounds lots of sciencey stuff. This is coming straight from their paper. All right. So there are essentially 5 different functionally grouped areas that are activated. Now, those areas that are involved in this particular graphic are the stimulus that's detected. You have orientation, so how it's detected, that's in yellow. So you can look on the little image of the brain here, yellow portions, that's where you're detecting and orienting yourself to the particular stimulus. You have your visual processing, that's in the purple. Your visual processing is back here in your occipital lobe. That's where your sight is processed. So you have your optic nerves that go from your eyes that shoot all the way to the back of your brain. That's why when you get hit in the back of the head, you see stars, because it's kind of like a reversing the polarity. That's a fancy sci-fi sounding thing. You're reversing the polarity. You get hit back here. You're sending an electrical signal back the other way, and that's what you see, is seeing stars. All right. Your emotional processing is in red. And so it's kind of surrounding a bit of that fight or flight type of response. And so that's the amygdala. You got that's where our different portions of the orbital frontal cortex, which is here. You have lots of different portions of the brain that kind of process the feelings associated with fear. Then you have in the orange section, that's the action representation. And so where the action representation happens is essentially, that's kind of like where you're still kind of processing a bit of um, what you're going to do, what kind of response you're going to have. And then your motor response is in the green. So, bull, you put in the YouTube chat the clown motel. Fun times. And these arrows that are in between, they kind of show the interactions between the two. So your emotional processing is going to affect how you respond. Your action representation is going to affect how you respond as far as your motor response. You have detection is going to go, works back and forth with the emotional. You have it also involved with visual processing. So it's just essentially, this is just kind of where it's represented in the brain. So let's catch up on the chat here and talk a bit uh, about what psychiatrists and psychologists do. Oh, you're getting lag all of a sudden. Uh-oh. We don't like lag. I only like lagging with my DNA. The lagging strand is what they call it. The lagging strand, it's the slower strand at the bottom when you go through. Lagging with that's okay, because that's completely and totally what happens with everyone, usually. All righty. So let's see. I can taste your fear in the air, mortal. Not fearsome. My secret is I'm afraid all the time. You're like the Hulk of fear, is it? I am angry all the time, you know. It's like I'm always angry. That's the Hulk. Are you always scared? Gosh, that's got to be exhausting. So, yes, the clown motel. So if any of you guys go to the clown motel, I don't want to hear about it at all. I cannot stand clowns. I have never liked clowns. Oh, there you go. The Clown Motel. Is that where is that? It's in Nevada. Do they have pictures of the clowns?
It's in Tonopah, Nevada. I don't know. Let me see if I can navigate to it.
Oh God.
Stargazing, haunted Tonopah. There's a whole section on haunted Tonopah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it goes on here. Apparently,
Oh no.
yeah. That's
That's a whole lot
this.
of nope.
Yep, there you go.
Even the decor is clowns. You walk
Right.
in, you just
Right. There's all
see.
these little figurines of clowns all over the place. That alone would creep me the hell out.
Oh God. And they have people that dress as clowns and they come into your room at night.
Yeah. No.
I don't ever want to do that. I would be in constant fear all the time, which is not a good thing for me to be in because I'm a pretty rational lady, you know. I'm a pretty rational person. But if I'm in a constant state of, oh my God, clowns everywhere, and I'm having to use my rational brain to talk myself down that I'm completely safe while experiencing that at extremely high levels, that's like I'm pretty certain I'm going to be given a bill for damage. I think they'll be like, "You destroyed all of our figurines in the hotel room and you hit Carl in the face. Carl is just doing his job."
But see, I'm sure they get that because they know how fear works.
So it would just be like they would be like, "Ma'am, you've been here 3 hours. We can't let you stay here." We that that would be me. And then I would probably end up in jail for assault and battery. I'm like, I thought I was in peril the entire time. You know, how do you defend that? You're like, I went to a place that has all of my horrible, insidious fears come to life to try to, like I said, I was trying to get over my clown fear. And it was completely counterproductive. And all I did was beat up a bunch of people and destroy things. How do you write? I'm just trying to see. This is where I need Nate Brody. Like Nate. I need to have him on the show one morning. I'll see if he can do that on my clown thing. Like, here's the clown hotel, Nate. Maybe we could talk about that sometime. I don't know. Anyway, I need to ask him. Like, would that be a decent defense?
Well, that would be a very interesting legal conversation in general. Like, what's the legality of making something that could actually cause someone to go on some kind of adrenaline fueled killing spree, basically? You know, because that's the thing, right? So, like, that has the potential to be quite violent.
It does, you know? So I would imagine the only clowns they would have would be like super big bouncer types of sorts that could probably just pick me up and throw me across the room. But I can't imagine either I would be like frozen in fear or I would be running out of the building or I would be tearing a person up.
Well, I'll give you a comparison. There's this place called House on the Rock. It's a it's a tourist attraction in Wisconsin. It's a monument to Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect. And you get
Yes,
to go
yes.
see his house that he built up on this cliff, and it's really cool, and you go
Mhm.
through it. And then you come back, and there's one way to go out, and it
Mhm.
funnels you into this doll museum. It took us 2 hours to walk through that. And I ran
Oh,
halfway through to get out. There's only one way to get out of that place. And it was
oh
horrible. It was dolls,
gosh.
one room decorated with one color dolls, the other with different colors. It was just
Oh,
ridiculous. I hated it. I don't know why, like, there wasn't a way to bypass it. And they didn't. I was seriously contemplating using emergency exits. And I was a kid, I was a child.
there was. Okay, so once upon a time ago, when I was a kid, we traveled a bit. My mother worked in travel, and so that was one of the things that she could do was get us decent travel stuff because she was a travel agent at the time, and she would do things, and different companies would comp her stuff. And so that's really like the coolest thing about, my my childhood, other than being broke and poor all the time. We actually had really nice vacations because she had a part-time job for a little while and became full-time. But we went to Florida, and they used to have something called Terror on Church Street. It took about 45 minutes to an hour to get through this particular haunted house, and it had 3 stories. It was a year round haunted house, and all of these people here were part of theater. But, but you're like, oh, okay, this is stupid. It's just a stupid thing. This was literally a person's job every day for a year. Okay, is year round. You would go and in primarily on the weekends though, but they were open in the evenings during the week too. And they would be packed. They would be right down the street around the corner. And so I'm there with one of my friends. They came with us, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not scared. I'm not scared at all. I'm not scared. I'm going to go through all this." You get to a point, and there's some science for this. You can look at the Stanford prison experiment, at how they started to believe that it wasn't an experiment anymore. They thought it was real. It started to become real. So when you're subjected to a high stress environment, and this was just after a few hours. This was after a few hours. This was going on with the Stanford prison experiment. People thought it was real, and it wasn't an experiment anymore, and that they were never going to leave. Um, I was only there like an hour. I stood outside about 15, 20 minutes waiting to get in, maybe 30, to get in. And they had the people on the street. They're walking like, you're gonna scream. We're gonna and it's I almost felt like they singled me out after a while because I was really cocky. I was super arrogant and cocky. So I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, ah. So I start going through, and your amygdala kicks in. But since it was year round and it was super high production quality, it was super high production quality. If you were in a forest, you were in a freaking forest. There were trees, the lighting was perfect. There were sounds. At one time, we were in a swamp. Another time, I was in a library. Another time, I was in a toy maker's office. Another time, I was in somebody's bedroom and there's an exorcist happening. Another time, I was in a morgue. In another time, I was in an asylum and people got out and Hannibal Lecter was there. Oh my God.
I remember when they tore that place down, I had actually moved here at that point in time and noticed it.
Oh,
And then they tore it down like a week later. It was in 2003.
wow. That's a shame. Um, I had completely bought in about 15 minutes into it, 15 to 20 minutes into it. You were walking through a graveyard, you were walking through a dungeon. There was just no end. And I saw the occasional fire exit, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. And that was like the only moment where your rational brain would be like, okay, this is still not real, I think. But even people that are serial killers would be in a building that have fire exits. So you start overthinking, and you're like, do people, what is this real or not? You start to question your own sanity for a little bit of time. And then you're like walking through this pitch black hallway, and then all of a sudden there's a strobe light, and then this vampire comes out, and you're like, oh, jump scare. But little do you know they're following you. And then you turn around and there they are. Hi. And you're like, oh my God. It's just, you're in a constant state of that heightened sensation to where it never just goes away. And I ended up, I didn't think we were going to leave. I didn't know. They don't tell you when it's almost over. Nobody tells you when it's almost over. And so I'm going through the last thing. There was a werewolf at one time that was chasing us through the woods. That sounds bonkers because we had just left the high school hallway where Freddie was at.
Well, this was year round, Micro. This whole thing, like this terror place, was open all the time. It was,
Yes.
yeah, it wasn't just a Halloween thing.
No, no. And they spent their money on all of the things to make you think it was real. I mean, it just sights, sounds, smells. If you were running through the woods from a werewolf, that was happening. It's like,
I don't think they changed it at all for Christmas. To be honest with you,
oh goodness. Ah, so did they change? Oh, Christmas version in summer. I don't know that they did. You had an undertaker that measured you and gave you tickets, and they're like, "I'm just measuring you in advance," and you're like, "Okay, you're funny," and you're like, "Oh, isn't this kind of kitschy?" And then by the time at the last scene, it was we were in a swamp and we had to cross a bridge. That was a shaky bridge over a river. And then there was, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy was giving us a countdown to cross the bridge or he was going to get us. Yeah, totally bought in at that point. Completely hook, line, sinker. Um, this is an endurance test at this point. Like, can I just get through without? And we managed after because we were running from the werewolf. We got through the to somebody's house. This sounds bonkers, but I'm totally being honest with you. We were running from the werewolf in the woods. Then we got to somebody's house and they let us in and like, what are you doing out this time of night? Don't you know that there's terrible things that are going to get you? And then he goes and opens the bookcase door and says, here's my secret passage to get out. And you're like, oh my God, thank you. It's a nice person who isn't trying to kill us. But then the werewolf comes and eats him while you're running through the bookcase doorway to the swamp, which is next. Somebody fell down and we had to stop and we had to pick them up. And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy's like, you got 5 seconds to cross this bridge. 1, 2, we're like, Mr. Chainsaw Massacre, dude, please give us a bit more time. Somebody fell. we're like trying to make deals to get more time to cross a bridge so the pretend guy doesn't kill us with his made up chainsaw. So we managed to go that, and then we go running across the bridge, and he's like chasing us, and we're screaming at the top of our lungs, go through the next door, all the way through the gift shop, out into the street. People were dying laughing. So
welcome to Orlando. That's where all the crime starts, is in that place.
Oh my God.
That's hilarious.
It just screaming like ninnies, completely terrified out of our minds. We had been through about an hour's worth, and it was 3 stories. You go up 3 stories, you come down, and you're like, oh my God.
Bless you, Tony Designs. I don't have to run faster than the guy with the chainsaw. I just have to run faster than you.
That's exactly right. We just kind of end up leaving the person behind who fell down. And people kept trying to shove me at the front. I said, no. I grabbed a dude by his pants and put his belt. Almost gave him a wedgie. I'm like, you're a guy, go in the front. I'm like, why I gotta go in the front? He was the only dude with like 4 girls in our group. And we're like, here's the bait. Be the big strong dude like they do in the freaking movies. We're gonna go run screaming. And he can get you first. It's fine. It's fine. So it's like, oh my God. It was so funny. And so all of those people that were working the street while we were waiting, they looked at it and they pointed at us. And I'm like, shut up. That was really scary.
They pointed at you.
They did. They pointed at us and they're like, I'm like, I don't want to talk to them. I'm going to pick up my dignity off the floor. Oh my my gosh. But yes, if you can't rationalize your way out of that fear, and you keep telling yourself, this isn't real. I paid for this. I spent money to have people scare the crap out of me. And it totally worked. I don't go to haunted houses. That ruined me for a while. I could not go to haunted houses because that showed me that I can buy into a situation like that. And it stirs that awful, awful anxiety to where I'm like, is this real or not? And I have a fantastic imagination. I already have and I have sleep paralysis. And so my brain is already wonderful at generating all kinds of crazy scenarios that look entirely real. So I'm like, I probably don't need to put myself in a fight or flight situation because I can be reactionary. You know what I mean? And, you know,
And I want to actually buy a house and set up a system where I can have a temporary haunted house in the backyard during Halloween. Like just use
that's
the
fun.
entire real estate of a backyard and
Uh-huh.
enclose it just for a couple nights, not long enough to kill the grass or anything,
Yeah,
and just go like have all these kinds of rooms that you go through like that. That would be freaking fun.
that would be fun. Um, but it's just, you have, in order to overcome that fear response, because that fear response is freaking strong, you have to rationalize your way out of it. So let's talk a bit about some of that science, but that's a little anecdotal fun about how I'm just like this. Oh, I'm not finished. I got to talk a bit. Hang on. Let me get back. Okay, so let me talk a bit about what psychiatrists and psychologists do. Okay, psychiatrists and psychologists study fear and its effect on the brain. We have a rational human brain, that's right here, and an emotional limbic brain back here. That's our monkey brain. That's our lizard brain. That's our brain that's like, oh my God, we're going to die. We got to respond. We're scared. Everything's horrible. And your rational brain's like, no, no, no. That little twig that you heard that broke in the woods probably was a squirrel, not a bear or Jason. So our rational brain kicks in when we have a stimulus initiating a fear response. It is our rational brain that decides whether or not we are indeed safe. Ooh, excuse me. We can get through this visual we can get this through our visual and verbal cues. So for me, when I'm going through the crazy looking haunted house, my visual cues are, oh, there's a fire escape. This is still a not real thing. It's an attraction. Um, you can get verbal cues from other people you're with. So if you were with somebody who was just laughing the whole time through the haunted house, that might give you a visual, also a verbal cue and some sound. They go, okay, they're laughing through this. This is clearly not real. So it helps me understand that I'm indeed safe and I don't need to panic right now. Well, so if we're at a zoo, for example, another example, we aren't afraid of the lions at the zoo because our rational brain is going, we're safe. They're in their habitat. They can't get to me. But if we were at the Serengeti, we're in the lion's territory. There is no expectation of safety when it comes to going on a safari where you're seeing lions. We can go to a haunted house, except for me, because if it's I'm there too long, and if it's really well done and you convince me I'm in peril, I'm going to be in peril and I'm going to think that's a thing. But normally, we can go to a haunted house and have fun knowing we aren't actually in danger. Now, sometimes, like for me, certain things are too scary to endure because it is a bit too real. Now, this comes from the emotional response overpowering the rational. But in all fairness, a lot of this is conditioning due to memories. We have that operant conditioning to a degree. So, that music that we hear in scary films, we know something's about to happen, and that enhances and heightens our sense of fear. Now, that's response where if it's something that's just a bit too real, or particularly if it's associated with a scary trauma that's happened to you, that response is difficult to work through in the rational mind, because if it's happened to you, it could very well happen again. So it's hard. So those are different types of social cues and other things that we kind of look at. Let me look a little bit. I used to be super easy to scare as a kid, but now I just end up laughing at the people in the haunted house because of how silly it is. Serious note from Tony Designs. I've always been convinced that watching much horror was a terrible idea because of the availability heuristic. Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? Unless it's an area that would have fire exits like a high school. True, true. I don't know. Monsters like Hannibal Lecter scare me way more than Jason or Freddy because Hannibal actually could be real. This is true. Like, The Exorcist doesn't scare me. The Blair Witch stuff doesn't scare me unless there's actually a person in the woods trying to knock off people. That stuff scares me. Psycho scares me. Films like that are just woo, because those are the monsters. Yeah. Fear is, Doc Pearson says, ScientistMel, can it be said that fear is the survival instinct? To a degree. It helps us, it's an evolutionary thing that's put into place to help us remove ourselves from a peril situation. So if you were to see something rustling out, if you were out hunting in the Serengeti and you saw something rustling that looked like it was kind of brown and it was pretty large, and you didn't have a large enough spear to take it down or the acuity or skill to be able to take down a lion, that's your cue to go run up a tree or something, or run the other way, or hide, or make yourself not visible until the predators pass. So your fight or flight response is extremely useful. And it is also useful when it comes to things that you might normally worry about. So, one way that people try to cope with the stress of their lives is to do different adrenaline pumping things. You see, like, they call them adrenaline junkies. Some people like to do like rock climbing, or they like to do base jumping, or they do the bungee jumping sort of thing. That thrill associated with that fear, and then your endorphins and your dopamine kick in afterwards, that helps them stop worrying so much about the everyday stress. Some people watch horror films in order to overcome that stress response. But for me, I have anxiety, so I already have that all the time anyway, so it's just awful. um, so let's see. Hey, did you disable Periscope comments? I didn't. Periscope still pops up. Let's see. I saw that. I did not disable Periscope comments. People can comment through Restream, but the thing is, I can't respond back, but I can see them. You should be able to comment there. I've had Periscope's been kind of buggy. All right. So let's look at this particular picture of what I've been talking about, your rational brain versus your limbic system. If your rational mind cannot work through the onset of the fear response, uncertainty can play a role in this flight or fight type of response. And that kicks in and you can panic. So if you're uncertain that you're 100% safe, that limbic system, that fight or flight, could kick in. So even after it kicks in, you can still talk yourself down. So let's have a look at what happens with the body, the physical effects of fear. Your saliva, the saliva flow decreases, so you get the dry mouth. Your pupils dilate because you want to bring in more light to be able to see what's going on. Your heart beats faster because it's trying to get more blood and oxygen to your muscles. Now your skin, your blood vessels constrict, and you get chills and you're sweating. You start breathing heavy. Bowel movements, they slow down. Usually Usually they slow down. There are some people that doesn't happen with, though. But there you go. Anywho, blood vessels, blood pressure increases as major vessels start to dilate and open up to try to get blood to your body to prepare you to fight for your life. Muscles, they become more tense and they start to tremble. In your stomach, you have a lot of output of digestive enzymes. So that's why some people get ulcers with the stress response. All right. I have a belief to challenge. I believe all emotion comes from fear. The fear is the essential emotion. Am I off my rocker? I don't think all emotion comes from fear, but you can have various emotions come from fear, though. You can have various emotions come from an onset of fear, and you can have a series of them, but I don't think emotion is exclusive to fear. Now, let's look at what happens when there are issues. We can have anxiety, we can have PTSD, and obsessive compulsive disorder. This is kind of where the fear happens and it's kind of not regulated. So I'll talk a little bit. Let me talk a little bit, catch up on the chat. I'll talk a little bit about what it's like when I have a panic attack. So I haven't, I have had a therapist tell me that I do have anxiety, and I do. Um, I don't need medication for it. If I start to have particular flare ups or stuff like that, then I will take. There's hydroxyzine hydrochloride. That's essentially an antihistamine. And it's a non-habit forming antihistamine. Sometimes it makes you sleepy. So I tend to take it at night, but usually that's when my anxiety tends to kick in anyway, is in the evenings after I'm not busy and I'm settling down and my brain's like, now that you're still, let's worry about 9,000 things right now, right before bedtime. And you're like, gee, thank you, brain. And sometimes it can happen in the morning when I'm waking up. Um, and it's not something that I control. Um, so, there's not always a stimulus. It could be just literally my brain has decided you haven't panicked in a while. We're going to make today be your special day for panicking. And so you start to have all of that fear response. So, what I have to do to overcome that is initiate and engage my rational brain and talk myself down, saying, I'm safe, everything's fine. These are things. So, if I have a worry thought that's trying to put me into an anxiety spirally mess, then I have to have things kind of canned responses to that particular thought. And so I have to respond with my rational mind. This worry is silly because these reasons right here. And sometimes my reasons aren't good enough. Sometimes I need somebody else to remind me of those reasons. And so I tell people that, I can rely on, like, if I'm talking to you and I say this is what I need you to say back to me. And I need you to give me evidence and things like that because it's hard for me to ignore evidence. It's easy for me to ignore comments, but it's harder for me to ignore examples, solid evidence examples of something that counters a worry in my brain. Evidence is often what it is that pulls me out of those fears, out of those panicky fears. Evidence and the support of people who care about me. And so when I have a panic attack and I'm getting into the full on fear response, that's how I counter it, is to sit there and work it through and say, hey, brain, you're being really dumb right now. All of these things you're trying to worry about are absolutely ridiculous. Here's all the evidence for that and have it on hand. Boom. That's right. I can't refute this evidence. It's right there in black and white. I know these are all true. I wrote them down. Here's other examples of each. Boom. It takes a minute, but that's usually what gets me through. The uncertainty associated with a worry or a fear based type of thing. I'm afraid this will happen, or I'm afraid that will happen. You worry about it. Evidence often saves me from just about everything when somebody else is trying to get me to feel scared or anxious, particularly with really mean comments on the internet. People say ugly things, and they can say things like that. And then I can go, oh, consider the source. Your statements are garbage, and there's nothing whatsoever that supports what you're saying. Therefore, I'm not going to listen to you. So I find the training that I've done in science and the work that I've done in science, that has helped my brain, my rational mind, kind of pull myself out of my anxiety moments. So let's have a look really quickly. I'm going to catch up on the chat here, and then I'm going to show you guys what happens with the brain on PTSD. Let's see. I'm checking up. Let's see. The thalamic pause. Do humans have a freeze option in addition to fight or flight? I think that's kind of like the fight or flight. You're just trying to not move. It's like the T-Rex when you hear the scary music and you're sitting there. Maybe the T-Rex won't see me if I don't move. I think that's an option, just trying to hide from predators too. I don't know about the others, but my understanding is there is a distinction between OCD and OC tendencies, the former being genetic neuroatypicality, possibly. I'm trying to find. Mindful meditation actually works to alleviate anxiety. It does for me too. I do find a lot of body scans sometimes help. Let's see. All righty. So I think I've checked up on the chat. Let's have a look at a brain on PTSD. Ah, my headphone just popped out of my ear. That was a ghost, guys. I just know it. It was a ghost that did that. I should be scared right now. Anyway, our sensory motor cortex. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the PTSD brain on fear. So normally with these different functions at the very top, it lists what the functions are. Now, a brain from a person who has post-traumatic stress disorder, their brain functionality is vastly different than somebody who does not experience PTSD. So, for instance, your prefrontal cortex, that's your rational thing to where you're able to regulate your emotional limbic brain. You do have some feelings there, but that's where your rational sense comes from. In a person with PTSD, that particular section of the brain has decreased gray and white matter density. There's less gray matter there. And the decreased responsiveness to trauma and emotional stimulus. And so they don't have as much of that rational ability because the brain matter is different. For a person with the amygdala, we know that that's where our associative learning is, where our conditioned fear is, where we've developed fears associated with things due to memories with that. So a person with PTSD, they have an increased responsiveness within the amygdala to different traumatic and emotional events. And so you can have somebody with PTSD have certain stimulus that causes that fight or flight response to happen a lot faster than somebody else. And with the less density of the prefrontal cortex, they have a harder time talking their way through it or rationalizing themselves out of that particular fear. With the hippocampus, that again kind of works along with the amygdala, with the conditioned fear and the associative learning. In the PTSD individual, you have an increased responsiveness as well. So you have that heightened sense of fear and danger in these particular individuals. So you have a lot of the limbic system is overpowering the rational system. So a person who suffers from PTSD, this isn't something they can control. It's something that takes a long period of time and often medication in order to rewire. And sometimes that rewiring doesn't happen of the fear circuitry, but through therapy, the support of others, and sometimes medication, they can work to try to help lessen the PTSD symptoms. The thalamus, so that sensory relay station that I was talking about, in an individual with PTSD, that they have decreased cerebral blood flow. So they have lessened blood flow within their brain. Um, so you can have all of these different types of fear response. So essentially, the fear response function is supposed to be for evolutionary survival. But for a person with PTSD, it's stress sensitivity. They have generalization of their fear response, and it also is impaired. It impairs them overall. So it's something to consider. People who have anxiety and PTSD and these sorts of things, they cannot help it. It's something that happens, and it requires time for them to work through it. So, let me talk a bit about this, kind of catch up on the chat as well. And we're wrapping up soon. So, individuals who have fear response issues like anxiety, PTSD, OCD, they experience very real fear that is outside of their control. They have the mental and physical responses that affect you when you have a stimulus or stimuli that starts the process. Many with these fear responses don't know what initiates their response. Therapists often help these individuals document the stages of their panic attacks. Um, they tend to go through and say, okay, what were you doing before it hit? And they ask you to write it down. So if you have a consistent panic attack, daily panic attack, writing down what you were doing prior to, were there any sounds, what it was, anything unusual happen, what happened afterwards, how are you feeling during. Having a journal is really, really important because it also kind of helps you kind of navigate what's going on. Um, you may have noticed I haven't used the term triggers, and there's a reason for that. The term triggers is actually a clinical term, but many therapists have taken to social media expressing their disgust at the fact they can no longer have that term triggers in their conversations with their patients, as it's now associated with making fun of other people. People often say words don't matter. Well, words do matter, and the definitions can change. Because people are often unkind and cruel, therapists now have to shift how they address their patients because of abusive people who behave this way in person and online. Consider how your language and your use of it shifts the perceptions of society. Words are powerful, folks. How do you use yours? Um, so I haven't used triggers at all through this for that reason. I've used stimulus, initiating the fear response. That's what I've had to use because I don't want anybody to think I'm making fun of them by saying something triggers their anxiety, because I'm not a jerk. But unfortunately, that term has taken a completely different meaning now. And therapists now have to change their dialogue in order to treat their patients who have their anxiety and fear response initiated by various stimuli, triggers. So let me catch up on the chat here. Oh, we're talking about love and empathy and hormonal addiction. Oh my goodness. You guys have interesting side chats. Oh goodness. I don't know. I did do an episode on love, and if you guys are interested, you can check it out and see what the brain is like on love. So I'm gonna wrap this up here because we're getting to the end of the show, guys. This has been amazing. I'm so glad you made the live chat too, Bang Fizz. And also, guys, I'm more active on my Discord. So if you haven't noticed, you can pop over there. And sometimes I get in the voice chat and then we're able to talk about different things, whether I'm sitting around at work doing my thing at work, or, you know, might be out and about just having a chat. And you can tell me what kind of topics you'd like me to discuss. So hop over on the Discord. We got good people there doing fun things. So let's kind of, and also this Sunday, Oral Audacity, we're going to talk about flat Earth. And we'll also have our section, Stupid Things on the Internet, because people are saying things to me. So I thought I would honor them by posting what they've had to say on my show on Sunday during that time. So, hey, do check it out. And next weekend, we're not having any shows next weekend, guys. I will be in the Netherlands hanging out with the incomparable Doc Savage. Woohoo! What we get? I missed it. Did somebody just subscribe?
Somebody subscribed.
Yay! Thank you for subscribing. And if you notice, little things pop up when you do stuff. And don't forget, in December, I'm going to send a swag bag to somebody who has the most Mel's Minions points on Streamlab. You get those points by engaging, by talking, and by just watching the shows when they're live. So do check it out. Do check out Mel's Minions points, and you can check your points by using the Streamlabs commands, and you'll be getting a swag bag in December, just in time for the holidays. And it'll have ScientistMel gear in it and lots of fun stuff, stickers, mugs, t-shirts, stuff. I think I'm going to throw in one of my figures in the back, guys. I'll throw in one of my figures just for you and put my name on it or something if you want me to. You may not want me to put my name on it, but I can if you want me to. I leave that to the discretion of the person. So yes, this is what we've talked about. Fear. We want to play the music again? No, we don't have time, do we? What is it? How does it work? What if it goes wrong? How do we overcome it? Somebody's going to get me, Bull. Somebody's going to get me. Your two brains are in charge. Rational and emotional. Your body responds accordingly. It's going to get me. But anyway, so that's the breakdown of fear. Here's all my sources. And you can check it out, ScienceDirect.com. Nature has a great article, and I'll post all of my stuff on my website, ScientistMel.com/resources. Woohoo! Nana, thank you for your donation. 666 through the super chat. Oh my goodness. 666. Goodness. Thank you for the super chat, Nana, one of my patrons. Been a patron of mine for a while. And there we go. So, where can you find me, guys? You can find me on the internet, ScientistMel.com. That's where you can check out the sources for the show. My patrons, they get special stuff and special stuff on the Discord too. I'm also, I'm really creeped out. It's coming to get me. Also, like, share, and subscribe. Yes. Ah! Like, share, and subscribe, and check out Audacity on Sunday. We're going to talk about flat Earth. Doc's choice. He picked the topic. He wants to talk about flat Earth. So be certain to watch. That's our comedy show, and it's not meant for the kiddies. I would say probably 14, 15 years old and older. PG-13-ish and older, because of the content and the sweary language. Doc swears a lot, but I can't change Doc. Anyway, that has been the science of fear. There you go. And you guys are here to share it with me. So, Mr. Rogers, my Mr. Rogers right here. You always make each day special for me. You know how? By just your being you. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys. Check out the Discord in the description. Bye.